Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. Translated by Richard M. Gamere. Letter 79 on the rewards of scientific discovery. 1. I have been awaiting a letter from you, that you might inform me what new matter was revealed to you during your trip around Sicily, and especially that you might give me further information regarding Charybdis itself. I know very well that Scylla is a rock, and indeed a rock not dreaded by mariners, but with regard to Charybdis, I should like to have a full description in order to see whether it agrees with the accounts in mythology, and, if you have by chance investigated, for it is indeed worthy of your investigation, please enlighten me concerning the following. Is it lashed into a whirlpool by a wind from only one direction, or do all storms alike serve to disturb its depths? Is it true that objects snatched downwards by the whirlpool in that strait are carried for many miles under water, and then come to the surface on the beach near Tauromenium? 2. If you will write me a full account of these matters, I shall then have the boldness to ask you to perform another task, also to climb Etna at my special request. Certain naturalists have inferred that the mountain is wasting away and gradually settling, because sailors used to be able to see it from a greater distance. The reason for this may be, not that the height of the mountain is decreasing, but because the flames have become dim and the eruptions less strong and less copious, and because for the same reason the smoke also is less active by day. However, either of these two things is possible to believe, that on the one hand the mountain is growing smaller because it is consumed from day to day, and that, on the other hand, it remains the same in size because the mountain is not devouring itself, but instead of this the matter which sees forth collects in some subterranean valley and is fed by other material, finding in the mountain itself not the food which it requires, but simply a passageway out. 3. There is a well-known place in Lycia, called by the inhabitants Hephaestion, where the ground is full of holes in many places and is surrounded by a harmless fire, which does no injury to the plants that grow there. Hence the place is fertile and luxuriant with growth, because the flames do not scorch, but merely shine with a force that is mild and feeble. 4. Let us postpone this discussion, and look into the matter when you have given me a description just how far distant the snow lies from the crater. I mean the snow which does not melt even in summer, so safe is it from the adjacent fire. But there is no ground for your charging this work to my account, for you were about to gratify your own craze for fine writing, without a commission from anyone at all. 5. Nay, what am I to offer you, not merely to describe Etna in your poem, and not to touch lightly upon a topic which is a matter of ritual for all poets? Ovid could not be prevented from using this theme simply because Virgil had already fully covered it, nor could either of these writers frighten off Cornelius Severus. Besides, the topic has served them all with happy results, and those who have gone before seem to me not to have forestalled all that could be said, but merely to have opened the way. 6. It makes a great deal of difference whether you approach a subject that has been exhausted or one where the ground has merely been broken. In the latter case, the topic grows day by day, and what is already discovered does not hinder new discoveries. Besides, he who writes last has the best of the bargain. He finds already at hand words which, when marshalled in a different way, show a new face, and he is not pilfering them as if they belonged to someone else when he uses them, for they are now common property. 7. Now if Etna does not make your mouth water, I am mistaken in you. You have for some time been desirous of writing something in the grand style, and on the level of the older school. For your modesty does not allow you to set your hopes any higher. This quality of yours is so pronounced that it seems to me you are likely to curb the force of your natural ability, if there should be any danger of outdoing others, so greatly do you reverence the old masters. 8. Wisdom has this advantage, among others, that no man can be outdone by another, except during the climb. But when you have arrived at the top, it is a draw. There is no room for further ascent. The game is over. Can the sun add to his size? Can the moon advance beyond her usual fullness? The seas do not increase in bulk. The universe keeps the same character, the same limits. 9. Things which have reached their full stature cannot grow higher. Men who have attained wisdom will therefore be equal and on the same footing. Each of them will possess his own peculiar gifts. One will be more affable, another more facile, another more ready of speech, a fourth more eloquent. But as regards the quality under discussion, the element that produces happiness, it is equal in them all. 10. I do not know whether this Etna of yours can collapse and fall in ruins, whether this lofty summit, visible for many miles over the deep sea, is wasted by the incessant power of the flames. But I do know that virtue will not be brought down to a lower plane either by flames or by ruins. Hers is the only greatness that knows no lowering. There can be for her no further rising or sinking. Her stature, like that of the stars in the heavens, is fixed. Let us therefore strive to raise ourselves to this altitude. 11. Already much of the task is accomplished. Nay, rather, if I can bring myself to confess the truth, not much. For goodness does not mean merely being better than the lowest. Who that could catch but a mere glimpse of the daylight would boast his powers of vision. One who sees the sun shining through a mist may be contented meanwhile that he has escaped darkness, but he does not yet enjoy the blessing of light. 12. Our souls will not have reason to rejoice in their lot until, freed from this darkness in which they grope, they have not merely glimpsed the brightness with feeble vision, but have absorbed the full light of day and have been restored to their place in the sky, until indeed they have regained the place which they held at the allotment of their birth. The soul is summoned upward by its very origin, and it will reach that goal even before it is released from its prison below, as soon as it has cast off sin, and in purity and lightness has leapt up into the celestial realms of thought. 13. I am glad, beloved Lucilius, that we are occupied with this ideal, that we pursue it with all our might, even though few know it, or none. Fame is the shadow of virtue. It will attend virtue even against her will, but, as the shadow sometimes precedes and sometimes follows or even lags behind, so fame sometimes goes before us and shows herself in plain sight, and sometimes is in the rear, and is all the greater in proportion as she is late in coming, when once envy has beaten a retreat. 14. How long did men believe Democritus to be mad? Glory barely came to Socrates, and how long did our state remain in ignorance of Cato? They rejected him and did not know his worth until they had lost him. If Rutilius had not resigned himself to wrong, his innocence and virtue would have escaped notice. The hour of his suffering was the hour of his triumph. Did he not give thanks for his lot, and welcome his exile with open arms? I have mentioned thus far those to whom fortune has brought renown at the very moment of persecution, but how many there are whose progress toward virtue has come to light only after their death, and how many have been ruined, not rescued by their reputation. 15. There is Epicurus, for example. Mark how greatly he is admired, not only by the more cultured, but also by this ignorant rabble. This man, however, was unknown to Athens itself, near which he had hidden himself away, and so, when he had already survived by many years his friend Metrodorus, he added in a letter these last words, proclaiming with thankful appreciation the friendship that had existed between them. So greatly blessed were Metrodorus and I, that it has been no harm to us to be unknown, and almost unheard of, in this well-known land of Greece. 16. Is it not true, therefore, that men did not discover him until after he had ceased to be? Has not his renown shone forth for all that? Metrodorus also admits this fact in one of his letters, that Epicurus and he were not well known to the public, but he declares that after the lifetime of Epicurus and himself, any man who might wish to follow in their footsteps would win great and ready-made renown. 17. Virtue is never lost to view, and yet to have been lost to view is no loss. There will come a day which will reveal her, though hidden away or suppressed by the spite of her contemporaries. That man is born merely for a few, who thinks only of the people of his own generation. Many thousands of years and many thousands of peoples will come after you. It is to these that you should have regard. Malice may have imposed silence upon the mouths of all who were alive in your day, but there will come men who will judge you without prejudice and without favour. If there is any reward that virtue receives at the hands of fame, not even this can pass away. We ourselves, indeed, shall not be affected by the talk of posterity. Nevertheless, posterity will cherish and celebrate us even though we are not conscious thereof. 18. Virtue has never failed to reward a man, both during his life and after his death, provided he has followed her loyally, provided he has not decked himself out or painted himself up, but has been always the same, whether he appeared before men's eyes after being announced, or suddenly and without preparation. Pretense accomplishes nothing. Few are deceived by a mask that is easily drawn over the face. Truth is the same in every part. Things which deceive us have no real substance. Lies are thin stuff, they are transparent, if you examine them with care. Farewell. Letter 80. On Worldly Deceptions. 1. Today I have some free time, thanks not so much to myself as to the games, which have attracted all the bores to the boxing match. No one will interrupt me or disturb the train of my thoughts, which go ahead more boldly as the result of my very confidence. My door has not been continually creaking on its hinges, nor will my curtain be pulled aside. My thoughts may march safely on, and that is all the more necessary for one who goes independently and follows out his own path. Do I then follow no predecessors? Yes, but I allow myself to discover something new, to alter, to reject. I am not a slave to them, although I give them my approval. 2. And yet that was a very bold word which I spoke when I assured myself that I should have some quiet and some uninterrupted retirement. For lo, a great cheer comes from the stadium, and while it does not drive me distracted, yet it shifts my thought to a contrast suggested by this very noise. How many men, I say to myself, train their bodies, and how few train their minds? What crowds flock to the games, spurious as they are and arranged merely for pastime, and what a solitude reigns where the good arts are taught. How feather-brained are the athletes whose muscles and shoulders we admire. 3. The question which I ponder most of all is this. If the body can be trained to such a degree of endurance that it will stand the blows and kicks of several opponents at once, and to such a degree that a man can last out the day and resist the scorching sun in the midst of the burning dust, drenched all the while with his own blood, if this can be done, how much more easily might the mind be toughened so that it could receive the blows of fortune and not be conquered, so that it might struggle to its feet again after it has been laid low, after it has been trampled underfoot. For although the body needs many things in order to be strong, yet the mind grows from within, giving to itself nourishment and exercise. Yonder athletes must have copious food, copious drink, copious quantities of oil, and long training besides. But you can acquire virtue without equipment and without expense. All that goes to make you a good man lies within yourself. 4. And what do you need in order to become good? To wish it. But what better thing could you wish for than to break away from this slavery, a slavery that oppresses us all, a slavery which even chattels of the lowest estate, born amid such degradation, strive in every possible way to strip off. In exchange for freedom they pay out the savings which they have scraped together by cheating their own bellies. Shall you not be eager to attain liberty at any price, seeing that you claim it as your birthright? 5. Why cast glances toward your strong-box? Liberty cannot be bought. It is therefore useless to enter in your ledger the item of freedom, for freedom is possessed neither by those who have bought it, nor by those who have sold it. You must give this good to yourself, and seek it from yourself. First of all, free yourself from the fear of death, for death puts the yoke about our necks. Then free yourself from the fear of poverty. 6. If you would know how little evil there is in poverty, compare the faces of the poor with those of the rich. The poor man smiles more often and more genuinely. His troubles do not go deep down. Even if any anxiety comes upon him, it passes like a fitful cloud. But the merriment of those whom men call happy is feigned, while their sadness is heavy and festering, and all the heavier because they may not meanwhile display their grief, but must act the part of happiness in the midst of sorrows that eat out their very hearts. 7. I often feel called upon to use the following illustration, and it seems to me that none expresses more effectively this drama of human life, wherein we are assigned the parts which we are to play so badly. Yonder is the man who stalks upon the stage with swelling port and head thrown back, and says, "Lo, I am he whom Argus hails as Lord, whom Pelops left the heir of lands that spread from Hellespont and from the Ionian Sea, e'en to the Isthmian Straits. And who is this fellow? He is but a slave. His wage is 5 measures of grain and 5 denarii. 8. Yon other who, proud and wayward and puffed up by confidence in his power, declaims, "Peace, Menelaus, or this hand shall slay thee," receives a daily pittance and sleeps on rags. You may speak in the same way about all these dandies whom you see riding in litters above the heads of men and above the crowd. In every case their happiness is put on like the actor's mask. Tear it off and you will scorn them. 9. When you buy a horse, you order its blanket to be removed. You pull off the garments from slaves that are advertised for sale, so that no bodily flaws may escape your notice. If you judge a man, do you judge him when he is wrapped in a disguise? Slave dealers hide under some sort of finery any defect which may give offence, and for that reason the very trappings arouse the suspicion of the buyer. If you catch sight of a leg or an arm that is bound up in cloths, you demand that it be stripped and that the body itself be revealed to you. 10. Do you see yonder Scythian or Sarmatian king, his head adorned with the badge of his office? If you wish to see what he amounts to, and to know his full worth, take off his diadem. Much evil lurks beneath it. But why do I speak of others? If you wish to set a value on yourself, put away your money, your estates, your honours, and look into your own soul. At present you are taking the word of others for what you are. Farewell. Letter 81. On Benefits. 1. You complain that you have met with an ungrateful person. If this is your first experience of that sort, you should offer thanks either to your good luck or to your caution. In this case, however, caution can effect nothing but to make you ungenerous. For if you wish to avoid such a danger, you will not confer benefits, and so that benefits may not be lost with another man, they will be lost to yourself. It is better, however, to get no return than to confer no benefits. Even after a poor crop, one should sow again, for often losses due to continued barrenness of an unproductive soil have been made good by 1 year's fertility. 2. In order to discover one grateful person, it is worth while to make trial of many ungrateful ones. No man has so unerring a hand when he confers benefits that he is not frequently deceived. It is well for the traveller to wander, that he may again cleave to the path. After a shipwreck, sailors try the sea again. The banker is not frightened away from the forum by the swindler. If one were compelled to drop everything that caused trouble, life would soon grow dull amid sluggish idleness. But in your case this very condition may prompt you to become more charitable, for when the outcome of any undertaking is unsure, you must try again and again in order to succeed ultimately. 3. I have, however, discussed the matter with sufficient fullness in the volumes which I have written, entitled On Benefits. What I think should rather be investigated is this, a question which I feel has not been made sufficiently clear, whether he who has helped us has squared the account and has freed us from our debt, if he has done us harm later. You may add this question also, if you like, when the harm done later has been more than the help rendered previously. 4. If you are seeking for the formal and just decision of a strict judge, you will find that he checks off one act by the other and declares, though the injuries outweigh the benefits, yet we should credit to the benefits anything that stands over even after the injury. The harm done was indeed greater, but the helpful act was done first. Hence the time also should be taken into account. 5. Other cases are so clear that I need not remind you that you should also look into such points as how gladly was the help offered, and how reluctantly was the harm done. Since benefits as well as injuries depend on the spirit, I did not wish to confer the benefit, but I was won over by my respect for the man, or by the importunity of his request, or by hope. 6. Our feeling about every obligation depends in each case upon the spirit in which the benefit is conferred. We weigh not the bulk of the gift, but the quality of the goodwill which prompted it. So now let us do away with guesswork. The former deed was a benefit, and the latter, which transcended the earlier benefit, is an injury. The good man so arranges the two sides of his ledger that he voluntarily cheats himself by adding to the benefit and subtracting from the injury. The more indulgent magistrate, however, and I should rather be such a one, will order us to forget the injury and remember the accommodation. 7. But surely, you say, it is the part of justice to render to each that which is his due, thanks in return for a benefit, and retribution, or at any rate ill will, in return for an injury. This, I say, will be true when it is one man who has inflicted the injury, and a different man who has conferred the benefit. For if it is the same man, the force of the injury is nullified by the benefit conferred. Indeed, a man who ought to be pardoned, even though there were no good deeds credited to him in the past, should receive something more than mere leniency if he commits a wrong when he has a benefit to his credit. 8. I do not set an equal value on benefits and injuries. I reckon a benefit at a higher rate than an injury. Not all grateful persons know what it involves to be in debt for a benefit. Even a thoughtless, crude fellow, one of the common herd, may know, especially soon after he has received the gift, but he does not know how deeply he stands in debt therefore. Only the wise man knows exactly what value should be put upon everything. For the fool whom I just mentioned, no matter how good his intentions may be, either pays less than he owes, or pays it at the wrong time or the wrong place. That for which he should make return he wastes and loses. 9. There is a marvellously accurate phraseology applied to certain subjects, a long-established terminology which indicates certain acts by means of symbols that are most efficient and that serve to outline men's duties. We are, as you know, wont to speak thus. A has made a return for the favour bestowed by B. Making a return means handing over of your own accord that which you owe. We do not say he has paid back the favour, for payback is used of a man upon whom a demand for payment is made, of those who pay against their will, of those who pay under any circumstances whatsoever, and of those who pay through a third party. We do not say he has restored the benefit, or settled it. We have never been satisfied with a word which applies properly to a debt of money. 10. Making a return means offering something to him from whom you have received something. The phrase implies a voluntary return. He who has made such a return has served the writ upon himself. The wise man will inquire in his own mind into all the circumstances, how much he has received from whom, when, where, how. And so we declare that none but the wise man knows how to make return for a favour. Moreover, none but the wise man knows how to confer a benefit. That man, I mean, who enjoys the giving, more than the recipient enjoys the receiving. 11. Now some person will reckon this remark as one of the generally surprising statements, such as we Stoics are wont to make, and such as the Greeks call paradoxes, and will say, do you maintain, then, that only the wise man knows how to return a favour? Do you maintain that no one else knows how to make restoration to a creditor for a debt, or, on buying a commodity, to pay full value to the seller? In order not to bring any odium upon myself, let me tell you that Epicurus says the same thing. At any rate, Metrodorus remarks that only the wise man knows how to return a favour. 12. Again, the objector mentioned above wonders at our saying, the wise man alone knows how to love. The wise man alone is a real friend. And yet it is a part of love and of friendship to return favours. Nay, further, it is an ordinary act, and happens more frequently than real friendship. Again, this same objector wonders at our saying, there is no loyalty except in the wise man, just as if he himself does not say the same thing. Or do you think that there is any loyalty in him who does not know how to return a favour? 13. These men, accordingly, should cease to discredit us, just as if we were uttering an impossible boast. They should understand that the essence of honour resides in the wise man, while among the crowd we find only the ghost and the semblance of honour. None but the wise man knows how to return a favour. Even a fool can return it in proportion to his knowledge and his power. His fault would be a lack of knowledge rather than a lack of will or desire. To will does not come by teaching. 14. The wise man will compare all things with one another, for the very same object becomes greater or smaller according to the time, the place, and the cause. Often the riches that are spent in profusion upon a palace cannot accomplish as much as 1,000 denarii given at the right time. Now it makes a great deal of difference whether you give outright or come to a man's assistance, whether your generosity saves him or sets him up in life. Often the gift is small, but the consequence is great. And what a distinction do you imagine there is between taking something which one lacks, something which was offered, and receiving a benefit in order to confer one in return. 15. But we should not slip back into the subject which we have already sufficiently investigated. In this balancing of benefits and injuries, the good man will, to be sure, judge with the highest degree of fairness. But he will incline towards the side of the benefit. He will turn more readily in this direction. 16. Moreover, in affairs of this kind, the person concerned is wont to count for a great deal. Men say, "You conferred a benefit upon me in that matter of the slave, but you did me an injury in the case of my father." Or, "You saved my son, but robbed me of a father." Similarly, he will follow up all other matters in which comparisons can be made, and if the difference be very slight, he will pretend not to notice it. Even though the difference be great, yet if the concession can be made without impairment of duty and loyalty, our good man will overlook it, that is, provided the injury exclusively affects the good man himself. 17. To sum up, the matter stands thus. The good man will be easy-going in striking a balance. He will allow too much to be set against his credit. He will be unwilling to pay a benefit by balancing the injury against it. The side towards which he will lean, the tendency which he will exhibit, is the desire to be under obligations for the favour, and the desire to make return therefor. For anyone receives a benefit more gladly than he repays it is mistaken. By as much as he who pays is more light-hearted than he who borrows, by so much ought he to be more joyful who unburdens himself of the greatest debt, a benefit received, than he who incurs the greatest obligations. 18. For ungrateful men make mistakes in this respect also. They have to pay their creditors both capital and interest, but they think that benefits are currency which they can use without interest, so the debts grow through postponement, and the later the action is postponed, the more remains to be paid. A man is an ingrate if he repays a favour without interest. Therefore interest also should be allowed for, when you compare your receipts and your expenses. 19. We should try by all means to be as grateful as possible, for gratitude is a good thing for ourselves, in a sense in which justice that is commonly supposed to concern other persons is not. Gratitude returns in large measure unto itself. There is not a man who, when he has benefited his neighbour, has not benefited himself. I do not mean for the reason that he whom you have aided will desire to aid you, or that he whom you have defended will desire to protect you, or that an example of good conduct returns in a circle to benefit the doer, just as examples of bad conduct recoil upon their authors, and as men find no pity if they suffer wrongs which they themselves have demonstrated the possibility of committing, but that the reward for all the virtues lies in the virtues themselves, for they are not practised with a view to recompense. The wages of a good deed is to have done it. 20. I am grateful, not in order that my neighbour, provoked by the earlier act of kindness, may be more ready to benefit me, but simply in order that I may perform a most pleasant and beautiful act. I feel grateful, not because it profits me, but because it pleases me. And, to prove the truth of this to you, I declare that even if I may not be grateful without seeming grateful, even if I am able to return a benefit only by an act which resembles an injury, even so I shall strive in the utmost calmness of spirit toward the purpose which honour demands, in the very midst of disgrace. No one, I think, rates virtue higher or is more consecrated to virtue than he who has lost his reputation for being a good man in order to keep from losing the approval of his conscience. Thus, as I have said, your being grateful is more conducive to your own good than to your neighbour's good. For while your neighbour has had a common everyday experience, namely receiving back the gift which he had bestowed, you have had a great experience which is the outcome of an utterly happy condition of soul, to have felt gratitude. For if wickedness makes men unhappy, and virtue makes men blessed, and if it is a virtue to be grateful, then the return which you have made is only the customary thing, but the thing to which you have attained is priceless, the consciousness of gratitude, which comes only to the soul that is divine and blessed. The opposite feeling to this, however, is immediately attended by the greatest unhappiness. No man, if he be ungrateful, will be unhappy in the future. I allow him no day of grace. He is unhappy forthwith. 22. Let us therefore avoid being ungrateful, not for the sake of others, but for our own sakes. When we do wrong, only the least and lightest portion of it flows back upon our neighbour. The worst and, if I may use the term, the densest portion of it stays at home and troubles the owner. My master Attalus used to say, evil herself drinks the largest portion of her own poison. The poison which serpents carry for the destruction of others and secrete without harm to themselves is not like this poison, for this sort is ruinous to the possessor. 23. The ungrateful man tortures and torments himself. He hates the gifts which he has accepted, because he must make a return for them, and he tries to belittle their value. But he really enlarges and exaggerates the injuries which he has received. And what is more wretched than a man who forgets his benefits and clings to his injuries? Wisdom, on the other hand, lends grace to every benefit, and of her own free will commends it to her own favour, and delights her soul by continued recollection thereof. 24. Evil men have but one pleasure in benefits, and a very short-lived pleasure at that. It lasts only while they are receiving them. But the wise man derives therefrom an abiding and eternal joy, for he takes delight not so much in receiving the gift as in having received it, and this joy never perishes, it abides with him always. He despises the wrongs done him, he forgets them, not accidentally, but voluntarily. 25. He does not put a wrong construction upon everything, or seek for someone whom he may hold responsible for each happening. He rather ascribes even the sins of men to chance. He will not misinterpret a word or a look. He makes light of all mishaps by interpreting them in a generous way. He does not remember an injury rather than a service. As far as possible, he lets his memory rest upon the earlier and the better deed, never changing his attitude toward those who have deserved well of him, except in cases where the bad deeds far outdistance the good, and the space between them is obvious, even to one who closes his eyes to it. Even then, only to this extent that he strives, after receiving the preponderant injury, to resume the attitude which he held before he received the benefit. For when the injury merely equals the benefit, a certain amount of kindly feeling is left over. 26. Just as a defendant is acquitted when the votes are equal, and just as the spirit of kindliness always tries to bend every doubtful case toward the better interpretation, so the mind of the wise man, when another's merits merely equal his bad deeds, will, to be sure, cease to feel an obligation, but does not cease to desire to feel it, and acts precisely like the man who pays his debts even after they have been legally cancelled. 27. But no man can be grateful unless he has learned to scorn the things which drive the common herd to distraction. If you wish to make return for a favour, you must be willing to go into exile, or to pour forth your blood, or to undergo poverty, or, and this will frequently happen, even to let your very innocence be stained and exposed to shameful slanders. It is no slight price that a man must pay for being grateful. 28. We hold nothing dearer than a benefit, So long as we are seeking one, we hold nothing cheaper after we have received it. Do you ask what it is that makes us forget benefits received? It is our extreme greed for receiving others. We consider not what we have obtained, but what we are to seek. We are deflected from the right course by riches, titles, power, and everything which is valuable in our opinion, but worthless when rated at its real value. 29. We do not know how to weigh matters. We should take counsel regarding them, not with their reputation, but with their nature. Those things possess no grandeur wherewith to enthrall our minds, except the fact that we have become accustomed to marvel at them. For they are not praised because they ought to be desired, but they are desired because they have been praised. And when the error of individuals has once created error on the part of the public, then the public error goes on creating error on the part of individuals. 30. But just as we take on faith such estimates of values, so let us take on the faith of the people this truth, that nothing is more honourable than a grateful heart. This phrase will be echoed by all cities and by all races, even those from savage countries. Upon this point good and bad will agree. 31. Some praise pleasure, some prefer toil, some say that pain is the greatest of evils, some say it is no evil at all, some will include riches in the supreme good, others will say that their discovery meant harm to the human race, and that none is richer than he to whom fortune has found nothing to give. Amid all this diversity of opinion, all men will yet with one voice, as the saying is, vote aye to the proposition that thanks should be returned to those who have deserved well of us. On this question the common herd, rebellious as they are, will all agree, but at present we keep paying back injuries instead of benefits, and the primary reason why a man is ungrateful is that he has found it impossible to be grateful enough. 32. Our madness has gone to such lengths that it is a very dangerous thing to confer great benefits upon a person, for just because he thinks it shameful not to repay, so he would have none left alive whom he should repay. Keep for yourself what you have received. I do not ask it back, I do not demand it. Let it be safe to have conferred a favour. There is no worse hatred than that which springs from shame at the desecration of a benefit. Farewell. Letter 82, on the natural fear of death. 1. I have already ceased to be anxious about you. Whom then of the gods, you ask, have you found as your voucher? A god, let me tell you, who deceives no one, a soul in love with that which is upright and good. The better part of yourself is on safe ground. Fortune can inflict injury upon you. What is more pertinent is that I have no fears lest you do injury to yourself. Proceed as you have begun, and settle yourself in this way of living, not luxuriously, but calmly. 2. I prefer to be in trouble rather than in luxury, and you had better interpret the term in trouble as popular usage is wont to interpret it, living a hard, rough, toilsome life. We are wont to hear the lives of certain men praised as follows, when they are objects of unpopularity. So-and-so lives luxuriously, but by this they mean he is softened by luxury. For the soul is made womanish by degrees, and is weakened until it matches the ease and laziness in which it lies. Lo, is it not better for one who is really a man even to become hardened? Next, these same dandies fear that which they have made their own lives resemble. Much difference is there between lying idle and lying buried. 3. But, you say, is it not better even to lie idle than to whirl round in these eddies of business distraction? Both extremes are to be deprecated, both tension and sluggishness. I hold that he who lies on a perfumed couch is no less dead than he who is dragged along by the executioner's hook. Leisure without study is death. It is a tomb for the living man. 4. What then is the advantage of retirement? As if the real causes of our anxieties did not follow us across the seas. What hiding place is there where the fear of death does not enter? What peaceful haunts are there, so fortified and so far withdrawn that pain does not fill them with fear? Wherever you hide yourself, human ills will make an uproar all around. There are many external things which compass us about, to deceive us or to weigh upon us. There are many things within which, even amid solitude, fret and ferment. 5. Therefore gird yourself about with philosophy, an impregnable wall. Though it be assaulted by many engines, fortune can find no passage into it. The soul stands on unassailable ground, if it has abandoned external things. It is independent in its own fortress, and every weapon that is hurled falls short of the mark. Fortune has not the long reach with which we credit her. She can seize none except him that clings to her. 6. Let us then recoil from her as far as we are able. This will be possible for us only through knowledge of self and of the world of nature. The soul should know whither it is going and whence it came, what is good for it and what is evil, what it seeks and what it avoids, and what is that reason which distinguishes between the desirable and the undesirable, and thereby tames the madness of our desires and calms the violence of our fears. 7. Some men flatter themselves that they have checked these evils by themselves, even without the aid of philosophy. But when some accident catches them off their guard, a tardy confession of error is wrung from them. Their boastful words perish from their lips when the torturer commands them to stretch forth their hands, and when death draws nearer. You might say to such a man, "It was easy for you to challenge evils that were not nearby, but here comes pain, which you declared you could endure. Here comes death, against which you uttered many a courageous boast. The whip cracks, the sword flashes. Ah, now, Aeneas, thou must needs be stout and strong of heart." 8. This strength of heart, however, will come from constant study, provided that you practice, not with the tongue but with the soul, and provided that you prepare yourself to meet death. To enable yourself to meet death, you may expect no encouragement or cheer from those who try to make you believe, by means of their hair-splitting logic, that death is no evil. For I take pleasure, excellent Lucilius, in poking fun at the absurdities of the Greeks, of which, to my continual surprise, I have not yet succeeded in ridding myself. 9. Our master Zeno uses a syllogism like this: "No evil is glorious, but death is glorious. Therefore death is no evil." A cure, Zeno! I have been freed from fear. Henceforth I shall not hesitate to bare my neck on the scaffold. Will you not utter sterner words, instead of rousing a dying man to laughter? Indeed, Lucilius, I could not easily tell you whether he who thought that he was quenching the fear of death by setting up this syllogism was the more foolish, or he who attempted to refute it, just as if it had anything to do with the matter. 10. For the refuter himself proposed a counter-syllogism, based upon the proposition that we regard death as indifferent, one of the things which the Greeks call adiaphora. Nothing, he says, that is indifferent can be glorious. Death is glorious, therefore death is not indifferent. You comprehend the trick fallacy which is contained in this syllogism. Mere death is in fact not glorious, but a brave death is glorious. And when you say nothing that is indifferent is glorious, I grant you this much, and declare that nothing is glorious except as it deals with indifferent things. I classify as indifferent, that is, neither good nor evil, sickness, pain, poverty, exile, death. 11. None of these things is intrinsically glorious, but nothing can be glorious apart from them, for it is not poverty that we praise, it is the man whom poverty cannot humble or bend. Nor is it exile that we praise, it is the man who withdraws into exile in the spirit in which he would have sent another into exile. It is not pain that we praise, it is the man whom pain has not coerced. One praises not death, but the man whose soul death takes away before it can confound it. 12. All these things are in themselves neither honourable nor glorious, but any one of them that virtue has visited and touched is made honourable and glorious by virtue. They merely lie in between, and the decisive question is only whether wickedness or virtue has laid hold upon them. For instance, the death which in Cato's case is glorious is in the case of Brutus forthwith base and disgraceful. For this Brutus, condemned to death, was trying to obtain postponement. He withdrew a moment in order to ease himself, When summoned to die and ordered to bare his throat, he exclaimed, "I will bare my throat, if only I may live." What madness it is to run away when it is impossible to turn back. I will bare my throat, if only I may live. He came very near saying also, even under Antony. This fellow deserved indeed to be consigned to life. 13. But as I was going on to remark, you see that death in itself is neither an evil nor a good. Cato experienced death most honourably, Brutus most basely. Everything, if you add virtue, assumes a glory which it did not possess before. We speak of a sunny room, even though the same room is pitch dark at night. 14. It is the day which fills it with light, and the night which steals the light away. Thus it is with the things which we call indifferent and middle, like riches, strength, beauty, titles, kingship, and their opposites, death, exile, ill health, pain, and all such evils, the fear of which upsets us to a greater or less extent. It is the wickedness or the virtue that bestows the name of good or evil. An object is not by its own essence either hot or cold. It is heated when thrown into a furnace, and chilled when dropped into water. Death is honourable when related to that which is honourable. By this I mean virtue and a soul that despises the worst hardships. 15. Furthermore, there are vast distinctions among these qualities which we call middle. For example, death is not so indifferent as the question whether your hair should be worn evenly or unevenly. Death belongs among those things which are not indeed evils, but still have in them a semblance of evil, for there are implanted in us love of self, a desire for existence and self-preservation, and also an abhorrence of dissolution, because death seems to rob us of many goods and to withdraw us from the abundance to which we have become accustomed. And there is another element which estranges us from death. We are already familiar with the present, but are ignorant of the future into which we shall transfer ourselves, and we shrink from the unknown. Moreover, it is natural to fear the world of shades whither death is supposed to lead. 16. Therefore, although death is something indifferent, it is nevertheless not a thing which we can easily ignore. The soul must be hardened by long practice, so that it may learn to endure the sight and the approach of death. Death ought to be despised more than it is wont to be despised, for we believe too many of the stories about death. Many thinkers have striven hard to increase its ill repute. They have portrayed the prison in the world below, and the land overwhelmed by everlasting night, where, within his blood-stained cave, hell's warder huge doth sprawl his ugly length on half-crunched bones, and terrifies the disembodied ghosts with never-ceasing bark. Even if you could win your point and prove that these are mere stories, and that nothing is left for the dead to fear, another fear steals upon you, for the fear of going to the underworld is equalled by the fear of going nowhere. 17. In the face of these notions which long-standing opinion has dinned in our ears, how can brave endurance of death be anything else than glorious, and fit to rank among the greatest accomplishments of the human mind? For the mind will never rise to virtue if it believes that death is an evil, but it will so rise if it holds that death is a master of indifference. It is not in the order of nature that a man shall proceed with a great heart to a destiny which he believes to be evil. He will go sluggishly and with reluctance. But nothing glorious can result from unwillingness and cowardice. Virtue does nothing under compulsion. 18. Besides, no deed that a man does is honourable unless he has devoted himself thereto and attended to it with all his heart, rebelling against it with no portion of his being. When, however, a man goes to face an evil, either through fear or worse evils, or in the hope of goods whose attainment is of sufficient moment to him that he can swallow the one evil which he must endure, in that case the judgment of the agent is drawn in two directions. On the one side is the motive which bids him carry out his purpose, on the other the motive which restrains him and makes him flee from something which has aroused his apprehension or leads to danger. Hence he is torn in different directions, and if this happens, the glory of his act is gone. For virtue accomplishes its plans, only when the spirit is in harmony with itself. There is no element of fear in any of its actions. Yield not to evils, but still braver go, where thy fortune shall allow. 19. You cannot still braver go if you are persuaded that those things are the real evils. Root out this idea from your soul, otherwise your apprehensions will remain undecided and will thus check the impulse to action. You will be pushed into that towards which you ought to advance, like a soldier. Those of our school, it is true, would have men think that Zeno's syllogism is correct, but that the second I mentioned, which is set up against his, is deceptive and wrong. But I, for my part, decline to reduce such questions to a matter of dialectical rules, the subtleties of an utterly worn-out system. Away, I say, with all that sort of thing, which makes a man feel, when a question is propounded to him, that he is hemmed in, and forces him to admit a premise, and then makes him say one thing in his answer, when his real opinion is another. When truth is at stake, we must act more frankly, and when fear is to be combated, we must act more bravely. 20. Such questions, which the dialecticians involve in subtleties, I prefer to solve and weigh rationally, with the purpose of winning conviction and not of forcing the judgment. When a general is about to lead into action an army prepared to meet death for their wives and children, how will he exhort them to battle? I remind you of the Fab, who took upon a single clan a war which concerned the whole state. I point out to you the Lacedaemonians in position at the very pass of Thermopylae. They have no hope of victory, no hope of returning. The place where they stand is to be their tomb. 21. In what language do you encourage them to bar the way with their bodies and take upon themselves the ruin of their whole tribe, and to retreat from life rather than from their post? Shall you say, that which is evil is not glorious, but death is glorious, therefore death is not an evil? What a powerful discourse! After such words, who would hesitate to throw himself upon the serried spears of the foeman and die in his tracks? But take Leonidas. How bravely did he address his men! He said, "Fellow soldiers, let us to our breakfast, knowing that we shall sup in Hades." The food of these men did not grow lumpy in their mouths, or stick in their throats, or slip from their fingers. Eagerly did they accept the invitation to breakfast, and to supper also. 22. Think too of the famous Roman general. His soldiers had been dispatched to seize a position, and when they were about to make their way through a huge army of the enemy, he addressed them with the words, "You must go now, fellow soldiers, to yonder place, whence there is no must about your returning." You see then how straightforward and peremptory virtue is, but what man on earth can your deceptive logic make more courageous or more upright? Rather does it break the spirit, which should never be less straitened or forced to deal with petty and thorny problems than when some great work is being planned. 23. It is not the 300, it is all mankind that should be relieved of the fear of death. But how can you prove to all those men that death is no evil? How can you overcome the notions of all our past life, notions with which we are tinged from our very infancy? What succour can you discover for man's helplessness? What can you say that will make men rush, burning with zeal, into the midst of danger? By what persuasive speech can you turn aside this universal feeling of fear? By what strength of wit can you turn aside the conviction of the human race which steadfastly opposes you? Do you propose to construct catchwords for me, or to string together petty syllogisms? It takes great weapons to strike down great monsters. 24. You recall the fierce serpent in Africa, more frightful to the Roman legions than the war itself, and assailed in vain by arrows and slings. It could not be wounded even by Pythias, since its huge size and the toughness which matched its bulk made spears or any weapon hurled by the hand of man glance off. It was finally destroyed by rocks equal in size to millstones. Are you then hurling petty weapons like yours, even against death? Can you stop a lion's charge by an awl? Your arguments are indeed sharp, but there is nothing sharper than a stalk of grain, and certain arguments are rendered useless and unavailing by their very subtlety. Farewell.